to paying our debts and what. We need to go in the opposite direction. We would tear it up, and we need to go back to the United States. Good paying, blue-collar jobs. We need fewer articles of life.
I agree with you. I just don't think it should be national because they don't know what they're doing yet.
Good morning, friends. Good morning, friends. The song that opens our service this morning, it's I call it my heart song. It's the song that I go to whenever I feel spiritually dry. And I want to invite us to meditate upon this song. And that can take any form that works for you in terms of meditation. You may want to sing or not sing. The text is this: Spirit of life, an invocation to the Spirit of life. Shared common breath. Sing in our hearts all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots, hold us close. Wings, set us free.
Even if it's the hard way.
Spirit of life.
It's a family thing since 1939.
That's in order to bring home. The Miracle Series new free loyalty program.
Giving
constipation or chronic constipation, like infrequent bowel movements. Syndrome with constipation or chronic constipation, like infrequent bowel movements.
Good morning, family. I'm Pastor Alexis Lilly, and I'm privileged to serve as a pastor of this beautiful community along with Pastor Jeff Wells. And so we welcome you into our family, into worship here at Church of the Village, and we are so grateful that you have walked through our doors, whether those are physical or virtual doors for you, and we hope that you feel you can bring your full, precious self to our time this morning. And we are honored to have this morning with us Dr. Julia Kim, who will be joining us via Zoom as our guest preacher today. She is a consultant, program facilitator, and invited speaker. She describes herself, and I'm going to say this slowly because it's so profound and beautiful, as an explorer at the interface connecting inner transformation and societal change. And in that pursuit, she draws on her long career as a physician and a public health researcher in Africa and Asia, and as a senior policy advisor at the United Nations. She currently serves as the program director of the Gross National Happiness Project Center in Bhutan. She'll obviously tell us more about that. My interest is piqued for sure. Dr. Kim will share with us today some of the emerging lessons of the attempt in Bhutan to create an economic and political system focused not on an ever-increasing economic output, which we often think of, right, in economies, but on the common good and the happiness and well-being of people, along with the whole ecosystem.
And I'm privileged to serve with Julia in the Alliance for Ecological Civilization, so I've gotten to know her a little bit. I've been privileged to get to know her, and I know what a wise and generous spirit she's going to bring to us today. And so I'm very excited to introduce Julia and the Church of the Village to one another. As a community, we are continually changing and becoming as we strive to follow God's invitation and inspiration. And as part of that, we seek to undermine all forms of oppression and stand in solidarity with those who suffer prejudice, hatred, and marginalization. And one way that we signal that is that each time we gather for worship on Sundays, we acknowledge that this land that we are worshiping on, physically and virtually, was forcibly taken from the Lenape people who inhabited and cared for this region for 10,000 years and still live in this area. And so you can find that the full land acknowledgement given to us by the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape tribal nation in our printed bulletins, which you have here. And if you don't have one, just raise your hand and the usher will bring you one. And also in our digital bulletin, for which you can find a link in the chat.
So let's take a moment to center ourselves as we continue our time of worship together this morning. Let's take a breath together. And as you let it out, imagine letting go of anything that you know of, or maybe that is subconsciously holding you back from being fully present in this time. And let's join together in a spirit of prayer. Oh God, on this Ascension Sunday, when churches gather and often celebrate Jesus' closeness with you and with God's Spirit and mothering presence, Open our hearts to the possibilities for deeper connection with all of creation. As we ponder where we place our priorities, may we sense the movement of your Spirit and be empowered to act toward the greatest good for all of your beautiful creation. We ask these things in the name and following the way of Jesus. Amen.
Good morning, family. Today's readings are powerful quotes from Jigme Tinley, the first Prime Minister of Bhutan. They will be read with a time of silence between each reading so that we may have an opportunity to immerse and bathe ourselves in wisdom. We know that true abiding happiness cannot exist while others suffer. Let me say that again. We know that true abiding happiness cannot exist while others suffer and comes only from serving others, living in harmony with nature, and realizing our innate wisdom and the true and brilliant nature of our minds. Gross national happiness seeks to complement inner skills of happiness with outer circumstances. Both sources have to be harmonized to bring about happiness. GNH recognizes that happiness can be realized as a societal goal. It cannot be left as an individualized goal, as yet another individual competitive good. Happiness is far too important also to be left to purely individual effort and search without collective or governmental endeavor. The society as a whole cannot obtain happiness if individuals compete for it at all costs irresponsibly in a zero-sum game. These are the words that lead to life. Thanks be to God.
Friends, it is my great pleasure to invite you to open your minds and hearts and spirits now to the message brought to us by my new friend and collaborator, Julia Kim.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Kim, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that beautiful opening and introduction. I'd like to pick up on those words that were shared by the first Prime Minister of Bhutan. And I'll be sharing a few slides that will help take you into the country of Bhutan visually as I tell the story of what's been happening in this country. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what you could think of as the opposite of gross national happiness, which is gross national product or gross domestic product as a measure of progress, certainly one that politicians and leaders pay a lot of attention to. So just to look at some of the myths behind that number. I want to then turn to Bhutan and the question of what does it mean to live a good life? Particularly focusing on 9 domains or areas of well-being that we've been focusing on measuring in Bhutan. And then I want to expand out a little bit to the big picture so that we think, what is happening in other parts of the world and share a little bit about a growing movement for change around well-being economies. So let's start with this myth of GDP growth. And I want us to think about the metaphor of an iceberg, which is what we talk about a lot in systems thinking when you look at the big picture. And we know that about 1/7 of an iceberg is above the water, and the vast majority of it is below. It's below the surface. So the world that we see, you could think about as a tip of the iceberg. It's the visible behavior. Often it's the symptoms of the problems that we're seeing. It's the newspaper headlines. It's what people are talking about. But what often doesn't appear are the structures and the systems below those symptoms. And you could think about the economic system as a really powerful part of that story. What's even further below the economic system and other structures are the paradigms of thought, the stories we tell ourselves, our narratives about life, our mental models, if you will. And those are really important in shaping the systems that we live in. And if you go even one layer below that, it becomes more profound and more subtle. Here we're talking about the source, the sources of inspiration, the vision, the values, the mindsets that in turn create our paradigms, which in turn shape our systems, and then we see the symptoms. So a great systems thinker, Donella Meadows from MIT, said that because mindsets and paradigms, that bottom layer, shape the behaviors and the systems, changing them can have a profound impact. So I'd like us to keep in mind this idea about getting to the source and our mindsets and vision. So let's talk about GDP as a paradigm and an economic paradigm. How did we get stuck with this obsession with growth? Well, in the 1940s, GNP was adopted by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and others to help predict and describe fluctuations in economic growth. And it was important then. We were coming out of the Great Depression and the World Wars. But the architect of GDP never actually wanted it to be an indicator of how a country is doing, its success or progress. It was never intended to be that. And that's because there are several problems with using it in that way. Basically, what it counts is only marketed economic activity. All this is counted as positive. It makes GDP grow, even if you're cutting down the redwood forests, even if you're leading to more pollution and illness, GDP will still go up. It's also a problem for what it misses. And that's a lot of the activities that are important for our society, for our well-being, but are outside the market. For example, coming to your service this morning, growing your community, none of that would show up as GDP. Also, a lot of the unpaid childcare, a lot of the work that women do does not get counted in GDP. And what it hides is uneven growth. GDP can continue to go up even while inequalities are getting worse. So it's interesting that at the time that Bhutan's fourth king in the 1970s was asked about gross national happiness, gross national product by a reporter in Bhutan, he's, instead of giving a number, he said, in Bhutan, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. And that's actually when that phrase was first coined. Interestingly, at the same time, a great leader in the United States, this is Senator Robert Kennedy, made an important speech, which you can find online, where he criticizes gross national product and says that basically it measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. So just to say that there were parallel stories and challenges to GDP that were happening in the East and the West at that time. So just some quick data to give you a taste of this. This is from the United States between 1972 and 2016. If you look at the blue line, you can see that GDP per person is increasing, has been increasing, and yet life happiness that's been measured in surveys in that country have been staying flat or even declining. And what matters most in happiness surveys beyond reaching a certain level of GDP growth after basic needs have been met are community trust, trust in government, meaningful and secure work, work-life balance. When you look at other countries, you see that as countries become more unequal, and this is a income inequality on the bottom of the graph with the really unequal countries, which include the United States on the far right, then social and health problems get worse. Things like life expectancy, rates of homicide, imprisonment, obesity, mental health. This composite index of these problems gets worse as countries become more unequal. And you see some of the Nordic countries on the lower left are doing much better. So if that's about unhappiness and inequality and the problems with GDP, what could we learn maybe as emerging lessons from Bhutan when they look at well-being and happiness, what it means to live a good life? And we heard the beautiful quote from the first Prime Minister of Bhutan that really shows that happiness is not just a superficial mood that we often associate with the word, but very profound. We can't actually be happy if others are suffering. And we really abiding or lasting happiness comes from serving others, living in harmony with nature, and realizing our innate wisdom. So right away, you see that this version of well-being and happiness is deeply relational. It's about reconnecting to self, others, and nature. Or as the current king of Bhutan would say, how do we develop the country with values? So it's also about balancing material and spiritual development, either when you're talking about individuals or as a country. How do we create the outer and inner conditions for flourishing and well-being? In Bhutan, this would be measured by 9 domains of happiness in a national survey, which are seen as creating the outer environment for well-being. And as you'll see, it includes things like health and living standards, which are important, education, obviously, but other more intangible things, which most countries don't measure: time use, community vitality, cultural diversity, and resilience, many of which were seen to be really important during the pandemic times. It's also important to say that gross national happiness is not about more and more and more. It's always better, like GDP would say. It brings in this idea of enoughness, of sufficiency. So even in the survey, out of those 9 domains I mentioned, if you thought of them as 9 cups that you want to fill, it's not about getting to 100% in all of them, but there's a sufficiency threshold in the survey set at, say, 60 or 70%, where if you scored at that level in the survey, you would be considered happy in that domain. And then taking the 9 domains or the 9 cups as a whole, You would be considered happy in the survey if you were sufficient in at least 6 out of the 9 domains. So it leaves some room for individual variation. So if you look at it taken together, there's the vision of the leaders of Bhutan saying that the purpose of the economy is not just to grow the economy, but the happiness and well-being of all life. It's about measurement to know that you're staying on track. So the G&H survey, which is done nationally around every 3 years or so, with the 9 domains, 33 indicators, that's done by the Center for Bhutan Studies and G&H Research. There's a policy screening tool that the government uses to guide policies. The G&H Commission has been screening policies to make sure they're aligned with those 9 domains. And then action, bringing it down to daily life, which the G&H Center Bhutan, my organization, has been doing, bringing it into business, education, youth, leadership. So in Bhutan, if you were to look at some of the policies, what would you see? One is when you would land in the country, you'll notice there's hardly any billboard advertising. It's banned in the country to really allow the nature and the beauty to come forward. The country has really prioritized people, universal free basic health and education, even though according to GDP standards, the country is not as wealthy as others. Teachers and healthcare workers were made the highest paid civil servants in the country. We've committed to keep at least 60% of the country under forest cover for all time, which makes Bhutan the first and only carbon negative country in the world, actually pulling out more carbon from the atmosphere than we're putting in. And nature is considered to be sacred, even though there could be a huge tourist income from opening it up to mountaineering, because the mountaintops are seen as a domain of spirit and sacred energy. That's been banned, and they have some of the highest untouched peaks in the world. High value, low impact tourism takes that further. It's more expensive to visit Bhutan, but they're trying to balance the tourist income with the social and environmental impacts. In the schools, you'll see that meditation, contemplation are taught, again, cultivating the inner leadership, the values of compassion in the education system. And all this while advancing key social indicators in the country, reducing poverty, reducing infant mortality rates. Life expectancy has been increasing, school enrollment has been increasing. Bhutan has moved into the middle human development category. So all this to say it's not perfect. It's not a Shangri-La. Definitely we're experiencing our own challenges. In the last survey, for example, Bhutanese youth were less happy than other age groups. That should make the government sit up and wonder and ask what's going on. Women less happy than men. Again, you can look at the survey and try to figure out what's going on there and respond. So improving rural infrastructure, initiatives to improve women's empowerment and political participation, and tackling growing youth unemployment and the exposure to social media and globalization. Again, how the survey can help move the country forward. All of Bhutan's leaders would be quite humble in speaking about any accomplishments. And as the first Prime Minister of Bhutan would say, we haven't really attained G&H. It's really more of a destination than a goal. And like most developing countries, we're trying to meet the basic needs of our people. But what separates us from most other countries is we've made happiness the goal of societal change. And this challenge is really about interdependence. Bhutan is connected to the rest of the world. We can't be a G&H bubble in a GDP world. So that takes me to the last bit of what I'd like to share today, which is what about outside of Bhutan? What does this mean for countries like the United States, Europe, other places? Well, I think one of the challenges to a well-being economy approach is that we're not operating in a vacuum. We know from research that many of us now shop and consume more for status and affirmation rather than actual need. And consumption, sadly, has become one of the only ways for an individual to exercise power. And so that's a real challenge. Breaking our consumption habits is proving extremely difficult. And there's a painful irony that in many wealthy countries, increased income and consumption actually is bringing little benefit to happiness and well-being while simultaneously devastating our planet. So how could we go beyond efforts to just live simply, to tackle some of the deeper politics of consumption? What's the shift in consciousness and the systems change that might be needed? I loved that we began today with a moment of silent contemplation, and there's a lot of research now coming out to show that a shift in consciousness really begins with claiming back our attention. So ancient wisdom and modern science coming together. Neuroplasticity is showing how our brains can adapt to practices like meditation, contemplation, in order to be able to cope with stress, to have greater resilience, even to cultivate compassion and altruism in our communities, in our organizations. So Dr. Richard Davison from the University of Wisconsin-Madison has said that exercising our minds should now be approached in the same way we think about exercising our bodies. And using a lot of this research, they have piloted the Healthy Minds program, which really focuses on cultivating 4 pillars of well-being: awareness, our ability to just be present; connection, kindness, compassion; insight into how our minds work and some of the stories we tell ourselves; and of course, connecting to a sense of purpose, values, principles, keeping motivated amidst all kinds of challenges. And this program is being applied in all sorts of areas, including climate and social justice activism. Well-being economies that serve people and planet rather than the other way around. For those who are interested, I'd encourage you to check out the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is a global network of many organizations, movements, and individuals, including in the United States, who are working together to transform the economic system towards a well-being economy. And within that, there are well-being economy governments, New Zealand, Scotland, Iceland, Wales, Finland, that are trying to take a leadership role at the country level. Where it's really daunting and difficult to work at a country level, many are drilling down to the city level. And Kate Rayworth, Donut Economics Labs, also looking at applying well-being economies in cities, including Amsterdam, San Francisco, Melbourne. Just last week at the European Union Parliament, there was a whole Beyond Growth conference where many European Union leaders, including the president of the EU Commission, were talking about how do we bring measurements and policies beyond GDP to our countries, to our cities. So just to say that this is becoming a growing movement around the world. So I want to close with some reflections from wisdom holders from different traditions. One from the West, from the scientific tradition, you'll recognize Albert Einstein. And he spoke about the need for a paradigm shift. We can't solve problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. And he spoke about the importance of a mind and a mindset. The world as we've created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And of course, the Buddha, who is a revered wisdom holder in Bhutan and many parts of Asia, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So incredible synergy and resonance between those two reflections. And that brings us to some questions I would like for us to maybe reflect on as a group today. What is there, if anything, about Bhutan's experience that strikes me as a shift in consciousness? And hearing about well-being economies, what seeds of possibility can I sense in my own community? And finally, maybe what first steps could I or we take to nourish those seeds of the future? So just some maybe food for thought this morning. And thank you so much, Pastor Jeff and others, for welcoming me into your community this morning. It's beautiful. Just I can sense the atmosphere in the room just from my Zoom screen over here. I feel like I'm part of your group. Really joyful to be here. Thank you.
So let's take a few minutes, friends, to have conversations around your tables. And for those online, you'll be put into random breakout rooms with 2 or 3 other people. Have some conversations for a few minutes, and then we'll come back together and maybe see if there's anything to share from that. I'm feeling a migraine coming on, so I'm going to go get some medicine.
Friends, the Spirit invites us to a different way of thinking at this table that believes, proclaims, and actually effects true salvation for everyone, not just for individuals, for the full community, for all of creation. So I invite you to stand, if you have energy, and sing together with us. Come to the table of grace. Come to the table of grace. Come to the table of grace. This is God's table. It's both yours and mine. Come to the table of grace, to the table of joy. Come to the table of joy.
Lens to children less than 18. It may harm them. Do not take Trulance if you have a bowel blockage.
Bayad dito
Most
para
common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it is severe, stop taking Trulance and call your doctor right away. If you have IPSC or chronic constipation,
loving power. Come up and do communion.
Hosanna, Hosanna
In the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest.
Blessed is the one who comes in the name of God's love.
Blessed is the one who comes in the name of God's love.
Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest.
Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest.
Yeah. Woo. Friends, Jesus modeled loving communion for us when he took bread and blessed it and broke it and shared it with everyone, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body, broken and given for you and for all." So friends, whenever we gather for this meal, let us remember that we are taking Jesus' love into ourselves.
Then Jesus lifted a cup, gave thanks to God, and shared it with everyone around the table, saying, "Drink from this cup, all of you. This is the cup of my love, poured out for you and for all. Whenever we gather at the table of love, may Jesus' Spirit be powerfully present among us."
Would you join me in a spirit of prayer? Loving God, we gather here in gratitude for this morning's inspiring message and conversation, for seeing with fresh eyes and being able to consider new ways of loving your creation. Forgive us for our complacency, for believing that our actions don't matter, for too often living by the standards of the systems in which we exist. This week, we specifically pray with those who are suffering under wars around the world. We continue to lift up those in Ukraine, Russia, and the myriad places experiencing conflict. As we think of ways we can join your work for peace in our own lives and communities, may our efforts have this wider-reaching ripple effect, bringing deeper contentment to creation. As we seek the well-being and happiness of all living things, we pray with those in our community experiencing loss, of loved ones, of health, of jobs, of relationships. May we find ways to support our siblings in their time of need so we may collectively move toward healing and wholeness. Holy One, be with each of us in our living and moving and being. May we always respond to your nurturing love that seeks to move with us toward this wholeness. And now, friends, I invite you to extend a hand as you're able so we may bless this table. All-encompassing God, pour out your Spirit on all of us gathered here today and on these gifts of bread and cup. Make them be for us the very essence of the all-embracing Christ, that we may be for the world the body of Christ, transformed and redeemed by your love. Through your child, Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit, all honor and glory is yours, loving God, now and forever. Amen.
And friends, we invite you now to receive and partake of these gifts of God and the earth. For those of you who are on site, our bread today is gluten-free and freshly baked, and we use grape juice in hospitality to children and those in recovery from addictions. If you are online, please enjoy whatever elements you have available to you. And now I want to ask one person at each table to please take the bread, don't break it yet, but lift it up, and when everyone's got the bread lifted up at each table, we will break that together. Looks like we're ready. The bread which we break is a sharing in the body of Christ. And the cup over which we give thanks is a sharing in the life of Christ, given for all. For those on site, we will share the bread with please share the bread with one another around the table. Take a big piece of bread. This is supposed to be an extravagant symbol of life and love. So take a big piece of bread and we will come around with the chalice to each table so that you can dip it in the cup. Yeah, I want to put a little bit more in here. life of Christ given for you. Jason, the life of Christ given for you.
Amen.
My name is John Kleinig, and I'm a member of the stewardship team here at COTV. I wonder how many of you are familiar with the story of the widow's mite. Want to stick up your hands if you are? A few of you are. Okay, not all of my generation, but some of my generation say that. Probably you were not brought up with the King James translation of the Bible, a poetic but somewhat obscure translation from the 17th century and very rarely used in the Church of the Village. So we don't talk much about mites here. Well, we all know what a widow is, but a mite, that may be unfamiliar, except as a tiny bug, the sort of bug that gets on my marigolds. In the story of the Gospels, this is what a mite looked like. I actually had a little replica of a mite, which I took out during the week and then promptly misplaced because of its size, of course. It's very, very tiny. It has a sort of an anchor on one side and the rays of a star on the other side. And it was the smallest of the Greek coins. It was still in circulation during the Roman occupation, but it was smaller than any of the coins, the Roman coins of Jesus' time. And it wasn't called a mite. That was the smallest coin of King James time, not the Greek time. It was actually called a lepton. Anyway, the story in the gospel is that Jesus is at the temple with the disciples, and he's watching people in the porch of the temple putting in their money for the temple work. And along comes this, a lot of them putting in quite nice sums, and along comes this poor widow, and she puts in all she has, which are 2 mites. It's very little. It's not going to make much difference to anything. That's really sacrificial giving because it's all she has. But that's not the point of the story. We often take that to be the point of the story, that we should give sacrificially. Jesus commends her sacrifice, but he doesn't demand it of others. He doesn't say, go and do likewise. What he does is contrast her giving with mine and with those of the other well-to-do people who have been giving their offerings, because they are giving generously, but only a small proportion of the much greater wealth that they have. So if I commend myself for what I give week by week, it's a much smaller, much less generous than the widow. And what he's commenting on is the tendency towards self-congratulation and self-satisfaction on the part of those who do give generously. I find it a very challenging story because I come nowhere near what the widow does, and I don't know that I give with the same spirit that she does. So what Jesus is trying to convey is that it's not about what we give, even about sacrificial giving, commendable though that may be, but it's about how we give. Whether we give as an expression of our commitment and devotion, or as an act of self-praise and smugness. So then, as we give our offering today, let us keep in mind why we give and express our love for the God who gives us all. Thank you.
Amen. Friends, you can see on the screen some ways that you can give, including online and so on. And now we're going to ask also over our dancers today, Elizabeth and Martine, to do their offering in dance also.
write your love upon my heart as my love, my goal, my story. In each thought, word, and deed, may my living bring you glory. Spirit, open my heart. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. May I weep with those who weep, share the joy of sister, brother, in the welcome of Christ. May we welcome one another. Spirit, open my heart. I love it. Liam's giving an applause back there. Good job. You too, Liam. Thanks for coming up. I want to thank everyone who contributed to making this such a wonderful service, our musicians, our stream team, especially our guest preacher and speaker, Dr. Julia Kim. And I want to announce for anyone who would like to pray or to speak with someone after worship that Valerie Roa will be available on site. I don't know, do I see Valerie here? Maybe Sarah Capers will fill in for her. Sarah, raise your hand, please. Oh, she's online. Okay, all right. So Valerie and Monica will be available online. So you just type CARE in the chat and you'll be put into a breakout room with them. And Sarah Capers here in the sanctuary will be in the back if you need to talk or pray with someone. Also, we have a meeting after worship today called Exploring Faith. And that is a gathering of those who are new to the church or have not yet joined and are considering membership to get together for about 45 minutes or so to learn more about our community, what we do, what we stand for, a little bit of our history, and also to get to know other people who are new to the congregation. So please join us. Where are we meeting, Pastor Alexis? Down in the chapel, which is one floor down. If you take this door outside, one floor down to the chapel, and we'll meet there. And for those online, we're meeting on the same Zoom or there's a different Zoom that I think is being made available. And finally, I will also want to formally announce, you may know that we had a charge conference last Tuesday. We didn't finish our business, so we are going to have another charge conference on Thursday, June 1st at 6 p.m. to finish our discussion and voting on the possible options for disposition of our building. So all members of the Vision and Ministry Council will be eligible to have voice and vote, and all members of the church are invited to attend and observe if you wish. Just let me or Pastor Alexis or Dwight know so that we can make sure that you get the link if you're joining by Zoom. For those on site, please stay around and fellowship with us afterwards. There's coffee and tea in the back. And now I want to invite Dr. Kim to offer a benediction and a sending forth for us.
Thank you so much, Pastor Jeff. Thank you so much, Pastor Jeff, and for...
Just a second, Dr. Kim, we're connecting your sound. 1 minute.
Okay.
Oh, we're ready. Go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you very much to Pastor Jeff, Jorge, all of you who've invited me into this space. I think there's a reason why community vitality is one of the 9 domains that Bhutan measures in gross national happiness. And what I've witnessed today in your beautiful Church of the Village and on the Zoom community is a real sense of closeness and community and common purpose and care, which I think is really at the foundation of what I was talking about earlier, this sense of deep connection, well-being that benefits oneself and also shines forth into the world to benefit others. So I'd like to close in a way that is quite traditional in Bhutan, which is called a dedication of merit, very much a blessing and a calling on grace. And merit is seen as a positive energy, the positive spiritual energy that is generated when a group of people come together, as we have this morning, really in a spirit of service and love and care, and with an aspiration to help others in the world. And when we dedicate the merit, when we call on this blessing, well, we believe that it magnifies the power infinite fold, similar to the story about generosity. It's in that spirit of boundless generosity that I'd like us to dedicate the merit, the positive energy of this service, of all of our intentions, to the well-being and happiness of all sentient beings, human, animal, all beings. that we will experience and share our light of happiness, compassion, wisdom, and love into the world. Thank you.
Yes. Amen. Now we want to invite everybody to stand up and get in a big circle around the sanctuary, and everybody online is also a part of this circle. Please join in singing.
Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than the shadows. Life is stronger than death. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than the shadows. Light is stronger than sin. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Life is stronger than the shadows. Life is stronger than death. Life is stronger than death. Life is stronger than death.
Hello, everybody online. Hello, Jeannie. Hello, Becca. Hi, Joy. Hello, Johnny. Hello, Gabrielle.
Johnny, it's so good to see you. Oh, sorry, that's my street, but it's really good to see you. I haven't been online in a long time. So I haven't seen you in a long time.
Hi, Becca. Are you talking to me?
I was talking to Johnny, but also hi, hi Jennifer. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm at home today, which it's a rarity. So I feel like experiencing service on Zoom, it's always like, oh yeah, I used to do this every week. This is so nice to remember that this is always like a whole different set of people. It's a whole different thing.
Right, right. Yeah, so I actually wanted to come into service today, but I don't know. I just needed to sleep a little longer.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had those mornings for sure. To me, I'm having like a lot of like physical stuff today and this week. And so wasn't the day for me, but I love
Right.
that I love that when I have something like that, I can still go to church. It's like I feel so grateful.
I still feel the energy. I think I'm going to be put in a room.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what Katie says in the chat. So we may get disrupted. I don't know. I just
Okay.
want to give you a heads up because it
Okay.
says putting me in a room.
That's
I had
good.
asked for care, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
mhm.
The magic of Zoom is I love that people just get like boop. They like
Right.
time travel. But great to see you.
Great to see you too. So, but I'm still here, so I guess
I
there's
know.
still. Oh, now it's okay. Now I'm
Okay.
joining. Okay, bye,
Have a
Becca.
great week. Bye, Jennifer.
You too.
Someplace in the website they mentioned small ministries and the anti-racism
Oh
meeting
yeah.
today at 12:25. Is that on Zoom? How can I join that?
Katie, you might have more information than I do. Johnny, it's John Kleinig is hosting something at his apartment. And I imagine we did one before where there was a Zoom component, but I'm not gonna be there. So I'm not sure of the ins and outs on it. But Katie, do you have any information? I don't know if she can hear me actually. She might
I
have.
asked a question and Katie says, yes, Johnny, it's me.
Oh, there it is
It's
in the chat.
meeting.
Okay.
Me, but it doesn't tell me how to get there. Oh, the John Kleinger host, yes, that's right, 12:45. Then how to get it to us is the question. Maybe I'll do it all by chat since somebody's watching it. So there it is. Is there a Zoom link, Katie? So,
That's me asking Katie. Because I think she can't, I don't think her audio is probably loud in the sanctuary, is my guess. So chat might be the best way. Let's see what she finds out. You're like, Katie,
12:45 is good. 12:45 is a good time for me. It gives me a chance to eat my lunch.
oh, perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go look at the emails to see if there's any mention of the Zoom link in the emails.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Here's the code. Okay. I gotta find a pen and write it down. It'll stay here.
Oh,
okay. My questions have been answered. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna go to my lunch now. Oh, I can't close this. Oh my God. My panelists. No. Memorize it. It's fast enough. 8, 6, 7. That's always that way. And 68, 66. 39, 55. So it's too much to remember. I mean, in a newsletter. What's your inbox? I find it show up.
I'm having a hard time finding the newsletter that she's mentioning, but let me see.
See what I can do. If not, next week I'll be better prepared. This one. Okay, so I should leave. Oh, just put this aside here.